You think you know what a medieval battle looks like. Two armies, lines of shining armor, heroes dueling on horseback. But here is a question the movies will never answer. What happens to a human body after it has been marching through mud for 6 hours, wearing 50 pounds of cold metal, before it even sees the enemy? The truth is, the real battle was not a duel. It was a meat grinder. And before you step onto that field, you need to understand something simple. You are not the hero. You are the man standing in the rain with a rock-hard biscuit for breakfast, wondering if today is the day you get stepped on by a horse. Stay with me, because what actually happened in a medieval battle is far stranger and far more terrifying than any fantasy. If you are ready to unlearn everything Hollywood taught you, hit like and subscribe to Little Historical. Every soldier who ever survived a medieval battle will tell you the same thing. The fighting itself was not the worst part. The worst part was trying not to fall down. Let me ask you this. In a crowd of 500 panicking men swinging axes and spears in the dark, what do you think happens to someone who slips on the mud? Do you think anyone stops to help him up? The answer is no. They step on him. And that is how most medieval soldiers actually died. Not from a heroic sword thrust, but because they tripped. So before we march onto this field, forget everything you have seen in the movies. Because the real battle has no slow motion, no last words, and no clean armor. It only has mud, fear, and the sound of someone screaming for a mother who is 1,000 miles away. To hear how anyone survived this nightmare, make sure you are subscribed. Hit like, hit the bell, and let us walk into the truth together. Let me tell you a secret that no epic poem will ever admit. The bravest man on a medieval battlefield is often the one who is lying face down in the dirt, pretending to be dead. Because here is the reality that history forgets. Most soldiers did not want to be there. They were farmers, not fighters. They were exhausted, hungry, and profoundly terrified. So ask yourself this. When the arrows start falling, what is the difference between a hero and a corpse? Usually, just luck, a slipped foot, a poorly aimed swing, a horse that decided to run left instead of right. That is the real story of what happened in a medieval battle. Not a clash of titans, but a chaotic, muddy, screaming mess where survival was an accident. If you want to know how anyone walked away from that field and what it did to them afterwards, you need to watch this. And if you are tired of fake history, do me a favor, subscribe to Little Historical right now, and let us dig up the truth. You wake to the sound of something between a scream and a horn, and for one merciful second, you forget where you are. Then the cold rushes in. Not the clean cold of a winter morning at home, but the damp, bone-deep chill of sleeping in chainmail on bare mud. You try to move and immediately regret it. Your back has locked itself into a shape that no longer resembles human. Beside you, a man is already sitting up, staring at his boots as if they have personally betrayed him. No one speaks. No one ever speaks at this hour. There is only the quiet, shared terror of men who know exactly what today might bring. Breakfast is a crust of bread that could double as a weapon, washed down with ale that tastes like old wood and regret. You chew slowly, not out of enjoyment, but because your jaw is still sore from yesterday. And as you chew, a question creeps into your mind like a cold finger down your spine. How many of these same faces will still be here when the sun sets? You try not to answer. Then comes the order to march. You stand, your thighs burn, your shoulders ache, and somewhere behind you, a man whispers a prayer so quietly you almost miss it. That prayer is not for victory. It is for the archers to aim somewhere else. The column shuffles forward, one squelching step at a time, through mud that seems to reach up and grab at your ankles. The air smells of wet wool, old sweat, and the faint, sweet rot of a corpse you passed 3 miles back. No one stops to bury it. There is no time. There is only the road, the hill in the distance, and the creeping suspicion that you are walking towards something you cannot undo. Hours pass. Your helmet rubs a raw spot on your forehead. Your feet have gone numb twice, and still you march. Not because you want to, but because stopping here means becoming another body by the side of the road. You glance at the man to your left. He is gripping his spear so tightly his knuckles have turned white. You wonder if he is thinking the same thing you are. And that is the moment you realize the battle hasn't even started yet, and you are already exhausted, already terrified, already half convinced you will not survive. So you keep walking, because what else can you do? You keep walking, and you try not to count the steps, because every step brings you closer to the ridge. And behind that ridge, something is waiting. You crest the ridge, and for one terrible moment, the world holds its breath. Below you, spread across the valley like a stain, is the enemy. Not a glorious army from a tapestry, but a shifting, muttering mass of men who look exactly like you. Tired, dirty, and profoundly unwilling to be here. Someone behind you begins to weep. You do not turn around. You cannot afford to. Because now, the drum has started. A slow, rhythmic thud that seems to crawl up through the mud and into your chest. Your heart tries to match its pace. Then, the shouting begins. Not battle cries, not yet. Just sergeants barking numbers, men shuffling into lines, the clatter of shields knocking against shields. You find your place. Left shoulder pressed against a man you do not know. Right shoulder against another. The shield wall is forming, and it feels less like protection and more like a cage. You try to breathe. The air is too thick. Then you hear it. A soft, distant whoosh that rises into a collective whisper of dread. Someone screams, "Shields up!" You obey, but your hands are shaking so badly you nearly drop the wood. And then the sky darkens, not with clouds, with arrows. They fall like angry needles, and the sound they make is not the clean whistle from the stories. It is a wet, percussive thud as they punch into shields, into the ground, into men. The man to your left goes down with a grunt, an arrow buried in his thigh. He does not scream. He just looks at it, confused, as if his own body has betrayed him. You want to help, but another volley is already coming. You crouch lower behind your shield, which suddenly feels no thicker than parchment. An arrow glances off the top with a clang that rings in your teeth. Another buries itself in the mud between your feet. The man on your right is praying aloud now, his voice cracking. You try to remember your mother's face. You cannot. Then, as suddenly as it began, the arrows stop. The silence is worse than the screaming. You peek over your shield. The enemy is moving. They are walking toward you, not charging, just walking. A slow, deliberate wall of wood and steel and fear. You hear your sergeant yell, "Stand fast!" But your legs do not feel like your own. The gap closes, 50 paces, 30, 10. You can see their faces now. One of them is a boy, barely old enough to grow a beard, and his eyes are wide with the same terror you feel. You think, absurdly, that you might have been friends in another life. Then the line hits, and the world explodes. What matters is breathing. Shallow, silent, invisible. The collision is not a sound. It is a physical event that travels up through your boots, through your spine, into the back of your teeth. One moment you are standing, and the next you are pressed against a wall of enemy shields, pushing, shoving, gasping for air that has turned sour with sweat and something metallic you cannot see. Your helmet has fogged, or maybe that is just panic blurring your vision. You swing your weapon because the man behind you is screaming at you to swing. You do not know if you hit anything. A blade crashes against your shield, and the impact numbs your entire arm. You swing again. This time, you feel the edge bite into something soft, and a sound comes out of the man in front of you that you will never forget. Not a scream, a wet, surprised exhale, like the last breath leaving a bellows. He falls. You step over him because there is nowhere else to step. The mud is slick now. You try not to think about why. The press of bodies tightens. You cannot raise your arm high enough to strike. You are chest to chest with a stranger who is trying to kill you, and you can smell the onions on his breath. His eyes are wide, not with rage, but with the same animal terror that is flooding your own veins. You shove your shield into his, and he stumbles back. A foot catches his heel. He goes down. And then the men behind him trample him without a second glance. That is the secret no song will ever sing. When a man falls in a medieval battle, he does not get back up. Not because he is dead, but because the living have no room to look down. You learn this yourself a moment later, when someone's shoulder slams into your ribs and your feet slide out from under you. You hit the mud hard. For one eternal second, you lie there, staring up at a sky gone grey with smoke and dust. Boots slam past your head. A hoof misses your face by inches. You realize with cold, perfect clarity that you have 3 heartbeats to decide. Stay down and hope they think you are dead, or stand up and become a target all over again. A man stumbles over your legs and does not even look back. You curl into yourself, make yourself small, and you wait. The battle churns on above you like a storm you no longer belong to. And in that muddy silence, pressed into the earth beside men who will never rise again, you understand something terrible. Survival has nothing to do with courage. It has everything to do with not being noticed. The battle moves on without you. The screams grow distant, then muffled, as if someone has pressed a pillow over the world's mouth. You lie still. A body lies beside you, face down in the mud, one hand still gripping a broken spear. You do not know if he was friend or enemy. It does not matter now. What matters is breathing. Shallow, silent, invisible. A pair of boots splashes past, then another. Someone is weeping nearby, not the loud weeping of grief, but the quiet, hopeless sound of a man who has realized he cannot feel his legs. You do not move. You have become very good at not moving. After an eternity, the chaos fades into a low groan of wounded men and the wet thud of someone searching bodies. That is when you hear the looters. They move through the field with practiced efficiency, rolling corpses over, tugging at boots, pulling rings from fingers that still have warmth. One of them steps on your ankle. You bite your tongue so hard you taste blood. He pauses. You feel his gaze on your back. A long, curious second passes. Then he moves on. He has found a better prize elsewhere. You wait until his footsteps disappear. Slowly, painfully, you push yourself up onto your elbows. The field stretches out before you, a wasteland of broken shields, abandoned weapons, and men who will never march again. The mud has turned a color you try not to name. You stagger to your feet. Your body is one massive bruise. Your left knee will not fully straighten, but you are breathing. That is victory. That is all victory ever was. You limp back toward the camp, past men who stare at nothing, past a horse standing alone and trembling, past a boy no older than 15 who is sitting against a tree, staring at his own hands as if he no longer recognizes them. No one cheers. No one hands you a medal. The cook ladles grey stew into a wooden bowl, and you eat it without tasting anything. You find a patch of dry ground, sit down, and watch the survivors drift in like ghosts. A man across the fire begins to tell a story about how he single-handedly held the line. You nod. You do not correct him, because you understand now that the battle never really ends, it just changes shape. Tonight, it lives in the ringing of your ears. Tomorrow, it will live in the quiet moments before sleep. But for now, there is the fire, the bread, and the unspeakable relief of still having hands to hold it.